Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Millennials in Charge, where we unpack the adult experience, one honest conversation at a time. I'm your host, Lex the Millennial, and today we're talking about the uncomfortable side of personal growth. We're going to talk about how working on yourself can change the way you relate to other people, especially if they're not working on themselves. Growth is a beautiful thing, but it can also be kind of lonely. The more you heal, set boundaries, and hold yourself accountable, the harder it becomes to accept chaos, toxicity, and stagnation in others. And that can create tension in relationships where you once felt safe. So, what do you do when your evolution starts to create separation? Let's unpack it. When I started taking my healing seriously, going to therapy, journaling, setting boundaries, it made me realize how often I tolerated disrespect, dysfunction, or emotional immaturity because I just didn't know any better. But once you know better, you feel everything differently. So I told y'all when I initially moved to Maryland, I was only supposed to be here for 3 months. 3 months turned into 1 year. 1 year turned into 2 years. 2 years turned into 3 years. And 3 years turned into almost 11 years. So during that time, I found myself single in a city where I knew no one but my research mentor. And with that, I found myself single and dating and just growing and learning and discovering what I liked and what I didn't like and who I wanted to be. My life was pretty peaceful. It was kind of tranquil. So when my family would come visit me or I would go visit them, I kind of found myself feeling displaced, kind of awkward, or even annoyed by them. Them being loud and cracking jokes, or I call it barking at each other when they spoke. It just didn't sit well with me anymore. I was like at a point where I was like, why do you guys talk to each other that way? I used to talk that way. Now, I don't know if it's just a New York State thing because I'm originally from Buffalo, New York, and it's upstate, and people from the city don't recognize it as New York or they think it's a suburb. But nonetheless, I feel like people from New York State have that like rah type of talk. And it's just like a common talk to them. It's not that they're trying to be offensive or aggressive. It's just that's just how they talk. But me being away for so long, I found it off-putting. I was like, "Whoa, why are you talking to me like that?" And this was something that I used to go back and forth with them, like, I'm fine. And we would joke and laugh and be loud, and it was like the loudness became overwhelming. It was kind of overstimulating for me, and I just found myself feeling kind of alone and kind of far away from the people that I was most close to. You know, Me and my immediate family are very tight, and especially my mother. And I found myself having to tell my mom, like, could you please not talk to me like that? Or, I didn't like the way you said this. I didn't like the tone that you used. You can just tell me this and I can respond. Now, my mama is black, y'all. She is black. She's a black mama. But my mom was a teenage mom. So we grew up together. And she wasn't just like a, you're meant to be seen and not heard type of parent. She was very much so like, don't let things bubble up and boil over inside of you. You know, your opinion matters. You can let me know things and tell me things and talk to me. Now, with that, I also knew there was a place and a time to do that. But, I'm grateful that she was like that. I think it's so funny. I was telling my husband that there's this guy on Instagram and I can't think of his name and I wish I knew his name, but he always has like these reels. He always gives like 5 things black people can't help doing. And I laugh with my husband because I find it so crazy that we all have the same shared experience with growing up. Like we grew up in different households. You could have grown up in a two-parent household or a single-parent household. No matter how you grew up, we all have the same shared Black experiences. And I don't know if you call it childhood trauma, but I just think like we all have those same rule books. And it's funny because like parenthood doesn't come with a rule book, but I feel like Black parents, I don't know, they had like a secret meeting about like what they were going to teach their kids, and we don't play that. And like so it had to be something because literally I just feel like we all have such similar upbringings and shared experiences when it comes to how we were raised. But I was fortunate enough to have a listening parent and not just a, do as I say and not as I do type of parent. So I was grateful that my transition from my mom seeing me as her adolescent child to her adult child was a fairly smooth transition. And I know that's hard for some parents. It's hard to differentiate between your child being adolescent and then them now being an adult with their own family, their own values, their own boundaries, even. Like, that's hard because I know from my experience, like, my child will be 3 years old and I still see him as that small baby that I brought home from the hospital. And a lot of times, I think our parents often see us as that small baby that they brought home from the hospital. It's they never stop being your baby, no matter how big they get. And I never understood that until I became a parent. I never understood why, my parents were like, oh, you'll always be my baby. And I'm like, no, I'm grown. Like, and I wasn't even in a rush to grow up, but I was very much alike. Once I felt that I was grown, I'm like, no, I'm grown. I'm not no baby. Don't call me no baby. I'm grown. But as an adult, you realize that is valid. That feeling is valid. Trying to hold on to your child being that small and snuggly baby when they needed you for everything, when they depended on you for everything, when they listened to every word you said. It's a valid feeling to have. So trying to now transition into raising an adult child is kind of a shock to the system. So I think we have to realize that we have to give our parents grace and space and forgiveness, no matter how they brought you up, because they honestly probably did the best they could do. Even if you feel like they could have done more, they probably did the best with what they had. So the millennials are a generation where we have the luxury of, assessing our trauma, figuring out, you know, for lack of better words, what our parents did wrong, what we like to do better, how we like to break generational curses, how we like to stop passing down generational trauma. We have that luxury, and that's a luxury that they didn't have. So we have to give them grace with that. And that's not to say that we can't learn and grow and they can't learn and grow with us. They can. But with healing, with growth, with self awareness, it does make those relationships harder to maintain. Growth can create a gap in energy, awareness, and accountability. As you're on your growth journey, you begin to crave peace, not chaos, honesty, and not avoidance. You don't want to sweep things under the rug like you've done your whole life with your family. You want to address things, you know. You want peace. For me, like, I pride myself on making my house a place of peace. It just has to be that. The world is hard enough. When I come home, when my husband comes home, when my children come home, I want them to know that this is a place of peace. When I have guests over and I host, family or friends, like, I want you to come over and feel like, oh, I just had a good time, or I had a good rest there. I want you to feel like it's home. So I love to create this sense of peace for everybody around me. Because like I said, when I first started my growth journey, it was hard to communicate with my family and kind of show them like, okay, I'm on a different path without me feeling like I'm down in them or now I'm looking down on the things that I used to do with them. You know, it's it was definitely hard. Growth is a process for sure. It's surely a process. And with that growth, sometimes relationships that once fit feel heavy or draining. And that's how I was feeling at first. And this is my immediate family. Like we pride ourselves on being close. We're like, we all we got. We have the best like Christmas family traditions. Like we try to create those traditions that, my mom didn't have growing up. And we try to create those traditions and, pass them forward to the next generations. And so it's hard to feel like that relationship that was the closest to me didn't fit anymore. And with that, it's not about superiority, it's about alignment. And misalignment makes things very loud. Misalignment makes differences very loud. When you're in misalignment with anybody in any form of relationship, whether it's a friendship, a familial relationship, or a romantic relationship, when you're no longer in alignment, everything they do, say, it's really loud and it's like, oh, you're not growing or you're not trying, and it just makes it loud, and then your growth becomes off-putting to them. Now they don't know where they fit in your life. With my former best friend, I feel like we had that situation. Like I could tell when I met my now husband, our relationship changed a little bit. And it's not that I wasn't a great friend, but I was growing. I was healed from my previous relationship and I was looking into my future. So we just weren't aligning on the things that we want. Like I'm married now. It's not that I can't have friends who are single. I can. But if your single friends aren't moving towards marriage, if that's what they want, and you guys become unaligned, it kind of makes that relationship, there's a little tension there. And I've even experienced it, in a friendship I had where I feel like they thought I was bragging about being married and how well my relationship is with my husband and my life. And it wasn't about bragging, it was just one, being proud, but two, it was just, kind of celebrating my growth. Misalignment can make it feel like you're being too loud when you're trying to celebrate your growth, or they're being loud with not trying to celebrate your growth. So, what happens when the people that are closest to you aren't growing with you? You might feel guilt. You might feel guilt for outgrowing someone, or even frustration. It's like they don't want to do the work to grow. And it's tough when you're making progress and they're comfortable staying the same. That's super tough. Like, it's almost like you can't relate anymore. And that's hard because then you kind of find yourself shrinking. And I found myself doing that. Like, family members can gaslight you for setting boundaries. Friends, who always bring drama and never take responsibility. Even your significant other might resist your growth because it challenges their comfort zone. And sometimes you have to realize that people who aren't growing may feel triggered by your growth. That's just the bottom line. Sometimes your growth is triggering to others, and that's why you do have to give grace and space. Like I said, with the parents, it's like they weren't allowed to say what they what they felt, what they were feeling, how their parents' actions made them feel. So that's triggering to then have their child turn around and do it to them. It was never done, so it's kind of hard to accept new things and change. I told you, nobody likes change because it's hard. Sometimes your growth can trigger other people because your healing reflects what they avoided, and that can cause tension. And then sometimes you find yourself over explaining or shrinking to keep the peace. I did that a lot in the beginning of my growth journey. I was shrinking to keep the peace. I did not want my family to feel as though I thought I was better than them. I did not want them to feel like I couldn't relate. But it was through, again, just continuing to grow, continue to do the work. I was like, no, there's a way I can say and do and be and continue to grow. And that's okay without having to shrink myself so they're comfortable. The key is to love people where they are without losing who you're becoming. That's absolutely important. You can you can absolutely love people where they are without losing who you're becoming. But that will take emotional maturity, limits, boundaries, and sometimes distance. Sometimes you need that distance to kind of evaluate where you are and see where you are and see where they are and see if your relationship can move forward. But you can love people and still hold them accountable. Grace does not mean tolerating mistreatment. It does not mean tolerating disrespect. It does not mean having your boundaries walked all over. That's not what grace is. Grace is giving people the space to be human. But if after 3 months now, if after 3 months they still not getting it, they're still not even trying to understand your growth journey, then you might need to reevaluate. It's okay to say, I love you, but I can't stay in this dynamic. Some people who have older parents, told you my parents are younger, but some people who have older parents find it hard to acknowledge their growth and transition from that adolescent child to that adult child because older generations are often stuck in their ways. They often won't change. They often won't admit their faults. And I think that's just a product of the way they were raised. It's not really their fault. I mean, yes, we can offer them to go to therapy now, but it's really on them whether or not they want to do it, whether they want to do the work. But in that same vein, it's okay for you to say, I love you, but I can't continue my adult relationship with my parent this way. And you can express your needs and what you need and how you'd like the relationship to move forward. Because you do not have to shrink your growth as an adult, as a human being for that matter, to keep the peace. You don't. You don't, because relationships must evolve to remain healthy, just like you do. For anything to grow, things must change. For things to grow, things must change. So, to maintain healthy relationships, they must evolve. They have to grow. They have to change. That requires a little stretching. It requires getting out of your comfort zone. So, what are some practical ways that you can love people where they are and still maintain your growth journey? Keep striving to grow. One way is to set boundaries. Not ultimatums, though, because ultimatums have never gotten anybody anywhere. Ultimatums put people on the defense, and you don't want to do that. Setting boundaries is fine. This is what I want, this is what I need. But ultimatums, I mean, you ever seen somebody give their significant other an ultimatum to get married, and then they do, and then, maybe some years go by, and then they divorce? It's because ultimatums don't work. People do what they want to do. They change when they want to change. So you don't give people ultimatums about your growth. You set boundaries. You communicate clearly but kindly. Because again, your growth can be triggering. It can cause tension, especially if they're not in their growth journey or on their growth process. It can cause tension and be triggering. So you want to communicate clearly, but definitely kindly. Be cognizant of how your growth may be affecting them, but recognize when to accept people for who they are and when to move on. I think we're good at giving others grace, not ourselves, but we're pretty good at giving others grace. And You have to recognize the difference between accepting people for who they are and when you need to move on. Now, I told you guys I went to a conference and one of the staff pastors told us that something our lead pastors say is be fruit inspectors. So what that means is like the people that you're around, the people that you're involved with, like before you just decide to like give up on that friendship or whatever type of relationship it is, inspect their fruit, see what fruit their life has bear. Do they have good households? Are they raising their children well? Are they happy? Are they healthy? Different things like that. You have to evaluate the fruit, because I do feel like we are a generation that we just decided that we weren't going to take any crap. And we just decided that anything worth our peace costs too much. And even in the last few years, like I still continue to work on that, because I used to be the cutoff queen. Like I was very like cut and dry. Like if you disrespect the boundary, and it's not that I was reinforcing them or anything, I was just like, nope, I'm done. I told you I didn't like this. You did it. I'm done. And we really have to like dial it back. We can't cut everybody off, and everybody is not against us. And we just have to make sure that we are actually taking inventory and inspecting the fruit that people are bearing, and making sure that, you know, these are valid and legitimate reasons for us to be cutting people off. With that being said, though, we have to make sure that we're not shrinking to stay connected. Like, are we shrinking to stay connected, or are we standing in our growth? Because I would play it small to keep the peace. It was just like you know what, this will go better if I just laugh at the jokes, or I just pretend this is fine even though it's not. Are you shrinking to keep the peace? Because anything worth your peace costs too much. It costs too much. You've worked too hard to abandon the healed version of yourself. I know I have. There's not anybody on this earth that is going to make me abandon the healed version of myself. I'm not doing that. It costs too much. The right people will celebrate your growth and not resent it. Again, there's an adjustment period. There's a grace period you have to give, because if you guys didn't start the growth journey together, and even if they started their growth journey after you, it still will take an adjustment. But with that, you have to remember, comparison is the thief of joy. Don't compare your growth journey to someone else's. But you should be able to celebrate somebody's growth, and they should be able to celebrate yours. Remember that you're not being too much. You've just grown past settling. And now we talked about settling versus compromising. And if you don't remember, go back and watch the episode about settling versus compromising, because you're not too much. Your growth journey is going to require some major work from you, and it helps to have support on that journey, because the hardest thing we can do is to get out of our comfort zone, to stop doing what feels comfortable, to tap into that uncomfortable. And no matter what, I want you to keep growing. Keep growing, even if that means outgrowing people. Even if that means outgrowing people. Again, take inventory, take stock, make sure you're not just cutting people off for no reason, or because they're not perfect, or because they're not you, or because you're holding them to unrealistic expectations. But as long as it's not hindering you, hindering your growth, or there's no disrespecting, I think you can find ways to work through it. Growth may cost you comfort, but it will always buy you clarity. I'm going to say that again. Growth may cost you comfort. The price to growth is comfort, okay? But it will always buy you clarity. Remember, you're not responsible for anyone else's healing, for anyone else's growth, for anyone else's changing. You're not responsible for that. You have to stay committed to your journey. Remember, it's a process, and sometimes it will get lonely. Your peace, your progress, and your purpose are worth it, though. They're worth it. This week, I want you to journal and reflect on one relationship where your growth feels strained. And I want you to ask yourself, am I being authentic or am I adjusting to make someone else comfortable? Because if you're adjusting to make someone else comfortable, you need to journal, write a note, whatever you need to do to get yourself to address that. You should not be shrinking yourself. You should not be reverting back to the unhealed version of yourself to make people comfortable. Relationships are going to have to evolve, and that person doesn't have to be on the same journey you're on, but they definitely can grow and accept your growth. They can celebrate your growth and they can acknowledge your growth. Growth is not easy. I'm currently on a growth journey in my faith. And the funny thing about that is that you're tested during your growth. A lot of times you're tested, and it doesn't make me perfect. It means that I'm trying. It means that I continue to seek the word of God. I'm trying to gain clarity through Him and not just the way I will handle the situation by, cutting everybody off and all those things. But it's a process. Growth is a process and it's a journey. Give yourself grace, give others grace as they grow and heal. Respect people's boundaries and what they're going through and how they don't like the club anymore. That's fine. Respect that. That don't make them lame. They just might not like the club anymore, and that's okay. Their priorities have shifted. Their mindset has changed. They're growing, and that just doesn't appeal to them anymore. And that just may no longer serve them. So, you know, we're definitely gonna grow and let go of things that no longer serve us. As always, thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Millennials in Charge. Guys, we are almost at the end of the season. We are about to wrap it up. We got one more episode next week, and then we are out of here. I'm going to come back with season 2, hopefully in the fall, but this has been such an amazing journey. I truly appreciate you guys for tuning in. So if this episode resonated with you, don't forget to share it with someone who's growing through what they're going through. Okay? And don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, like, share, comment, engage with me. It's fine. DM me. Follow on TikTok. I think the TikTok is Millennials in Charge Pod. We're coming to the end of the season, but it's not the final season. It's just the end of season 1. We're almost about to wrap this thing up. So I just can't wait to continue to unpack this wild, crazy ride we call adulting together. See y'all next time. Don't forget to catch Millennials in Charge every Wednesday at 6 a.m. Eastern. You can tune in on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, or wherever you get your podcasts. See y'all next week.